You were never lost. You were just silenced. You don't need to learn anything new. You just need to remember what was never truly forgotten. But there's a reason you've been disconnected, a reason your soul went silent. It's not because you're broken. It's because the world taught you to speak from your mouth, but never from your soul. There is a sound inside you that no one else can hear, not because it's quiet, but because it was never meant to be spoken out loud. It's not a word, it's not a mantra, it's not a chant. It's a frequency, and it's been vibrating since before you were born. But to hear it, to feel it, you must pass through the fire that lives behind your voice. That's why this isn't a video about knowledge. It's a return to your essence, to your ancient self, to the vibration hidden beneath every breath you've ever taken. The Rishis of India didn't call this awakening. They called it smṛti, remembrance, because what is sacred was never far. It was simply buried beneath the noise of the ego. And the technique you were about to rediscover was never lost. It was hidden, guarded by silence, protected by vibration, and encoded in the very center of your being. This is not mythology. This is not a metaphor. This is your soul remembering how to speak again. And it all begins here.
Chapter 1. The Hidden Fire Behind Your Voice. You were never told this, not because it wasn't known, but because it was sacred. In the ancient lands of India, before religion became ritual, before words were carved into stone, there was a fire that lived in silence. It didn't burn wood, it burned illusion. And those who found this fire didn't shout about it. They whispered it, or said nothing at all. Because the most powerful truth a soul can remember is not taught, it is remembered in silence, through vibration, through presence, not with the mouth, but through the place inside you that was never disconnected. That place is still alive in you, and it's waiting. The ancient Rishis didn't believe the soul needed to evolve. They believed it had only forgotten. And the greatest danger was not the forgetting, but the noise that replaced what was once sacred. Noise from the mind, noise from the world, noise from the voice of an ego that never truly belonged to you. And this is where the true journey begins. Not in temples, not in scriptures, but in a space behind the voice, where the sound you were meant to carry is still sleeping. In Sanskrit, they called this place Vishuddha, the center of purity, the gate between earth and ether, the sacred bridge between truth and vibration. It's not just a chakra, it's a threshold, a silent portal. Because the words you speak shape your reality, but the sounds you hold back shape your soul. Now you must ask, what sound is still hiding in your silence? What sacred truth did you swallow to be accepted? What vibration did you silence just to survive? The Rishis warned, if you forget this fire too long, your voice no longer belongs to you. It belongs to the world, to the masks, to the noise. But if you remember, even for a second, the vibration begins to rise again. And that's what this journey is about. Not to discover anything new, but to return to what was always there. A soundless fire, a silent name, a vibration that passes through Vishuddha and echoes beyond thought, beyond fear, beyond form. You're not just here to speak. You're here to remember. And what you're about to remember was never meant to be spoken with words. It was meant to be felt with the soul. And the moment you feel it, everything changes.
Chapter 2: The Rishis Who Never Forgot. Not everyone forgot. In every age, in every yuga, there were a few who refused to let the flame go out. They were not kings. They were not priests. They did not seek temples built of gold or crowds chanting their names. They sat in forests, in silence, their bodies still, their eyes closed, their voices inward. They were called Rishis, not because they believed, but because they remembered. They remembered the sound behind all sounds, the breath behind all mantras, the silence behind all truths. They didn't worship the divine like a faraway god. They became the divine through presence. Their power wasn't in what they could show, but in what they could withstand. Stillness, hunger, heat, darkness, and the terrifying truth of being alone with the self. Because when everything external fades, only one thing remains: who you really are beneath the noise. And most people run from that. But the Rishis didn't run. They walked straight into the fire of inner truth and let everything false burn. They knew the mind would resist. They knew the ego would scream. But they also knew the one who surrenders awakens. Not because they are worthy, but because they are empty. Empty of story, empty of identity, empty of the need to be anything. And in that emptiness, something awakens that no mantra can teach. They didn't teach through books. They didn't lecture in crowds. They sat in presence. And in their presence, others remembered too. Not because of words, but because of vibration. The fire in them spoke directly to the fire in you. And this is how the sacred code was passed on, not through language, but through resonance. Like one flame lighting another without losing its own light. The Rishis guarded no doctrine. They guarded vibrational alignment, because they knew if your mind is still cluttered with false beliefs, you can't hold this frequency. You'll distort it. You'll misuse it. You'll turn it into ego again. That's why only those who purified the Vishuddha, the voice, the center of expression, the bridge between lower and higher, could even begin to receive it. You may not live in a cave. You may not wear saffron robes. But the same fire still sleeps within you. The same silence still waits behind your voice. And the same remembering has already begun.
Chapter 3: Symbolic Death in the Ashram of the Soul. No one ever told you this, but to awaken the soul, you must first watch the ego die. Not with violence, not with fear, but with silence. The ancient rishis didn't perform dramatic rituals. They didn't call upon spirits or sacrifice animals. Their initiation was much more radical. They sat, still, unmoving, for hours, for days, for lifetimes, until the false self began to tremble. The ashram wasn't a building. It was a vibrational field, an inner sanctum where all distractions dissolved. And once inside, you couldn't bring your masks with you. You couldn't be someone. You had to be no one. No name, no status, no story. Because to enter the ashram of the soul, you had to strip away everything the world gave you, especially what made you feel safe. This wasn't spiritual poetry. It was a death. The kind of death that doesn't touch the body but burns through identity. A symbolic cremation, where the I melts and the truth begins to speak through silence. And the voice it speaks with doesn't come from your mouth. It rises from the throat, from Vishuddha, not as sound but as frequency. A silent pulse piercing the illusions you once called me. Most couldn't handle it, because symbolic death is not beautiful, it's not bliss. It's terrifying to feel your stories dissolve, your beliefs vanish, your goals lose meaning. And yet, this is the sacred doorway. The Rishis knew, before the soul can speak, the ego must fall silent. Before the vibration can rise, the voice of the mind must break. Before the sacred fire can ignite, all false light must go dark. This is why the ancient ones never taught the technique openly. Because the technique isn't the hard part. The silence is. The stillness, the waiting, the emptiness. The part where you realize you were never afraid of death. You were afraid of seeing yourself without a mask. And this is the exact moment where your true voice begins to awaken. Not a voice made of words, but one made of vibration. It doesn't speak to impress. It doesn't shout to be heard. It resonates. It transmits presence. It remembers. Because the one who survives symbolic death doesn't return more enlightened. They return more real. And when you're finally real, you don't need to say a single word for the whole room to feel your presence.
Chapter 4. Beyond the mind, beyond the mantra. There comes a moment on the path when even the most sacred words must be left behind. Not because they weren't powerful, but because they already served their purpose. The ancient mantras were not prayers. They were bridges. They tuned the body. They purified the breath. They aligned the vibration. But they were never the destination. The destination is silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence after the mantra ends, where something begins to speak that was never made of sound. The Rishis warned the mind will try to hold on. It will try to keep repeating the mantra, clinging to form, to sound, to structure. But true remembrance only begins when the mantra dissolves and the listener disappears. And what remains is pure awareness. A seeing without eyes, a knowing without logic, a feeling without emotion. This is the territory of the higher chakras, Ajna, Sahasrara, but their door is Vishuddha, the gatekeeper, the purifier, the transmuter of sound into silence, and silence into truth. This is where most seekers stop, because here there are no visions, no teachers, no miracles, only presence, only stillness, only a subtle vibration so delicate that if your mind moves even slightly, you miss it. And yet that fragile pulse is the most powerful truth you've ever touched.
Because in that space, you're no longer repeating sacred words. You are vibrating with sacred reality. The Rishis entered this state not through effort, but through refinement. They let the breath slow. They let the thought pass. They let the sound dissolve. And in that purity of stillness, they crossed the invisible veil, not upward, not outward, but inward. And what they found there was not a god or a vision or a doctrine. What they found was themselves before the world. And that is what Vishuddha holds. Not power over words, but freedom from them. Because when your voice is purified, it no longer serves the ego, it serves the soul. It doesn't echo what others say, it speaks from beyond the mind, from a place untouched by fear, comparison, or ambition. So now ask yourself, what would remain of you if the words were taken away? What would you feel if even your thoughts fell silent? Would you disappear, or would something far deeper finally appear? That presence, that vibration, is not an experience, it is you. And it's been waiting for this silence your entire life.
Chapter 5. The Single Eye of Perception. You've been taught to see with your eyes, to analyze, compare, name, judge. But the Rishis knew, as long as you rely on what your eyes show you, you will never see what is truly there. Because truth isn't visible, it's vibrational. And it's not seen with two eyes, it's perceived through one, the single eye, the still center between thought and silence. They called it eka chakshu, the eye that doesn't look outward but inward, through the throat, through the third eye, through the crown. It doesn't recognize form, it recognizes essence. It doesn't see objects, it sees what they're made of. And when this eye opens, you no longer ask, "What is that?" You feel what it is made of, and what you are made of, too. The mind hates this kind of seeing. It can't organize it, can't define it, can't control it. Because the single eye doesn't live in the mind. It lives in the space behind it. It watches thought, but is not thought. It sees emotion, but does not react. It observes form, but touches vibration. This is why the ancients went silent, not because they had nothing to say, but because they had begun to see. And what they saw was everything. They saw how sound moves before it becomes a word. They saw how fear attaches itself to identity. They saw how light bends when truth is spoken from a place of ego versus soul. They didn't learn this in books. They perceived it. And this perception began the moment their voice grew quiet and Vishuddha cleared the path. Because the single eye doesn't open through force. It opens when vibration aligns, when the lower centers surrender, when your voice stops trying to convince the world of who you are, and you finally just are. Whole, silent, aware. And in that stillness, you see not just the truth in others, but the illusion in yourself. You see how long you've been running from your own presence, how deeply you feared seeing life without a filter, and how ready you finally are to stop hiding.
So now you stand at the edge, not of vision, but of real seeing. Not with your eyes, not with your thoughts, but with the silent, eternal field that has always watched from within. And this is the beginning of true perception.
Chapter 6. The Purification Through Stillness. Not everything needs to be healed. Some things simply need to be seen and allowed to dissolve in stillness. The Rishis understood what the modern world has forgotten. Stillness purifies. Not through effort, not through force, but through vibrational release. You don't need to fix the soul. You need to become quiet enough for the noise to fall away. And in that silence, you'll see what you thought was pain was just unprocessed sound, unspoken truths, unfelt emotions, forgotten memories vibrating below the surface because you never gave them space to rise and breathe. That's why Vishuddha is the purifier. Not because it blocks what's dark, but because it allows what was buried to rise into light and be heard without fear. It is the chakra of energetic digestion. It metabolizes suppressed vibration and converts emotional residue into pure awareness. But only if you're willing to sit with the fire without trying to escape. Stillness is not absence. It's presence without resistance. When you sit in stillness, you are not doing nothing. You are becoming the space through which everything false begins to unravel. You begin to feel the heat behind the heart, the weight behind the jaw, the tremble behind the breath. You notice how your voice has carried so many masks, how many times you spoke from fear, or silenced yourself to be accepted, or used words to hide your pain. And as you sit with that, something ancient begins to move. This is the purification the Rishis spoke of. Not moral, not external, but vibrational. It is not about being better. It is about becoming transparent, so that when the soul begins to sing again, it doesn't echo through distortion, but moves through a channel that is clear, receptive, real. And Vishuddha becomes that channel. Not the master, not the speaker, but the flute through which the silent wind of truth can pass. And when that wind begins to move, you'll feel it. Not as a thought, not as a vision, but as a frequency rising through your spine, spinning with clarity, rising through the throat, merging with the upper chakras, and preparing the way for something you have waited lifetimes to feel again. So now ask yourself, what if the silence you feared was the only space where your soul could finally speak? What if the stillness wasn't empty, but sacred? And what if every time you chose to be still, instead of reacting, escaping, or performing, you were purifying the very path that your soul was meant to walk?
Chapter 7. The Soundless Name Within You. There is a name that was never spoken aloud, because it never needed to be. It was never meant for language. It was never meant for the world. This name is not made of syllables. It doesn't have a beginning or an end. It cannot be translated. It cannot be taught. It is not a word. It is a vibration. And it lives at the center of your being, waiting for you to become still enough to remember it. The Rishis never tried to describe this name. They said it could only be known by those who had passed through the silence of Vishuddha and emerged without identity. Because the ego wants a name it can say,
The soul carries a name that can only be felt. And when you feel it, everything you thought you were starts to dissolve. You don't hear this name through your ears. You feel it in your chest, in your spine, in the hollow behind your throat where truth used to tremble. It vibrates softly, like a memory that was never forgotten, but just waiting for you to be quiet enough to return. It doesn't come during chanting. It comes after the chant has ended. When the breath slows, when the heart opens, when the voice is no longer trying to prove anything, that's when it begins to rise. This vibration is not separate from you. It is you. Without your story, without your trauma, without your fear. It's the pure frequency of your being, untouched by time, unmoved by opinion, unchanged by the world. This is the name you carried before you were born, the one you will carry after death, the one that never needed to be remembered because it never stopped resonating. And here's the mystery. The more you try to define it, the further it slips away. Because this name doesn't belong to the mind. It belongs to your essence. The moment you try to hold it, it fades. The moment you become it, it floods you. Not with words, but with a certainty. A still, sacred recognition that says, I was never broken. I was never lost. I was simply vibrating beneath the noise, waiting for this moment to be felt again. So now sit, not to listen, but to become silence. Not to seek sound, but to open space. Let the breath slow. Let the voice go quiet. Let the vibration rise. And when it does, don't name it. Don't analyze it. Just allow it to pass through your throat and into the stars as the frequency that was always yours. This is your soundless name. This is your origin frequency. This is who you've always been.
Chapter 8. The return to the source that was always here. The journey is not outward. The journey is not upward. The journey is inward until even the idea of a journey dissolves. Because the source you've been seeking was never far. It was never hidden in temples, nor buried in books, nor locked in secret teachings. It was here, always, waiting for the noise to quiet and for you to return. The Rishis didn't teach transcendence as escape. They taught it as reunion. Not the kind that takes you away from the world, but the kind that returns you to it with new eyes, a new voice, and a vibration that no longer depends on outside validation. When you return to the source, you don't become enlightened. You become empty. And in that emptiness, truth doesn't visit you. It becomes you. No more trying to awaken, no more needing to remember, no more forcing silence, just being. Not because you gave up, but because you finally stopped chasing what was always inside you. The purified Vishuddha no longer needs to speak. It no longer needs to chant. It simply radiates. Because now, your entire being has become the mantra. Your breath is the offering. Your stillness is the temple. Your awareness is the altar where the invisible meets the visible.
and nothing needs to be said. Because the soul doesn't need words to know it has come home. And now that you're here, you see the world differently. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. You walk through chaos in stillness. You speak less, but with more power. You listen not with ears, but with presence. You no longer carry your voice in your throat. You carry it in your vibration. And that vibration now speaks for you. It tells the truth, even when you're silent. It transmits love, even when you say nothing. It holds clarity, even when others don't understand you. Because you are the source now, not separate from it, not on your way to it, but resting in it. You didn't transcend the body, you aligned it. You didn't silence the mind, you outgrew its noise. You didn't abandon the world, you remembered how to be in it without being of it. And that is the real return, not to a past, not to a heaven, but to the silent center of your own eternal essence, the place where you were never judged, never lost, never broken, only vibrating underneath the surface, patiently waiting for you to come back.
Final activation. Say it out loud. Anchor the frequency. If you felt something awaken, if a silence moved through you, if even for a moment you remembered what has no name, then don't let that vibration fade. Anchor it now. Speak not from the mind, but from the soul. Write in the comments below, I remembered who I am. Let the world feel your presence. Let your voice ripple through this field of silence, because every soul that remembers strengthens the signal for others to remember too. You are not alone in this. There are thousands of us waking up in the middle of a sleeping world. And when you leave that comment, you're not just writing words, you're transmitting a frequency, a remembering, a return. Say it, anchor it, spread it. And if this message spoke to something ancient in you, don't stop here. I've chosen the next video for you to watch. It continues exactly where this one ends. Click the video appearing now on your screen, and I'll meet you there, in the silence between the breaths, where your soul is already waiting.